morning. Today's daf is daf Chof Aleph Amud Beis. Amud Aleph. And we are up to 6 lines to the top of the page. Okay. We're going to introduce now a concept called Gittin Daf. When a husband gives a get to his wife, Torah says you have to write the get, the nosim, you have to give her the get, nosim to say for Christus, you have to give it in her hand. And it has to meet her either in her hand or we say also in her reshus. You can put it in her house, in her chutzah, and according to the Torah, it's whether she's agreeable to the get or whether she's not, it's a valid get. But what happens, you put it in the chutzah, the chutzah doesn't belong to her. But then you give her the chutzah as a gift. So at the same time, but the only way she can be kind to the chutzah is if she's divorced. Otherwise, whatever she owns belongs to her husband. So, but the only way that she can own the chutzah is if she's divorced. But the only way she can be divorced is if she owns the chutzah, because the get is right now sitting in the husband's courtyard. So therefore, we have a concept called Gittin Daf that the get and the chutzah both happen in tandem at the same time. And the Tzaisis and others, he wants to learn that even though this might not work when it comes to general kinyonim, you want to give someone something and you put it in the chutzah and you say, this concept Gittin because you need a cause and effect, which is a cause and which is the effect. You can't have them both at the same time. But when it comes to Gittin, he says, it's not the Torah's emphasis is not so much that she should be kinded, but that the husband should give it. The kvetches and the synod. The stress of what the city giving, and the fact is that he gave it at the same time. So we're easier here, and that's why one of the choices hold that it doesn't work only if the chutzah already belonged to you first. Only by Gittin it works, because Gittin is not so much a kinyan more than a sinner, but the husband is giving it to her.
So because it's Benasa.
Yeah, Benasa. Yeah, so it is biyadi. So it is beyond because he gave her the chutzah, and that's what so the chutzah belongs to him. He is giving it to her at the moment. The chutzah is his hand. So the moment he transfers the chutzah from his hand to her hand, he is giving it to her. The only reason why the get is valid is because there's a chutzah there already. And the problem is, so he says over here we can do it because you don't need so much the acquisition, it's more as the husband is giving to the wife. That definitely is happening now at the same time. It's easier to make same time giving rather than just a kinyan. So let's learn inside. Omar Rava says Rava Kosa look, he wrote her get Venus to be and he gave it over to this Eved. And because he wrote another separate contract. He said, I'm gifting this to my wife. And now the problem is the only way she can own the Eved is if she's divorced. The only way she's divorced is if she owns the Eved. Kanasu Umis she's kind of both of them concurrently. So Gemara now digresses. But why? An Eved is kind of, the law is that anything which is found in your yard is considered yours. And an Eved, whatever he picks up for the master or the mistress, but as a chutz, as a property. But the problem is, this is a mobile property, it's moving. And a chutz maleches is not koine. The chutz maleches is like koine. We know that a chutz maleches is not koine because the whole idea of a chutz is midrabanan. And when do we say it's koine? Only if it's stationary, like a regular piece of property. The Eved is standing still and gives it over to the woman. Rava laid down a rule that kol makom anyway. Kol she'ilu mahal. Since the Eved, if he would be walking, he wouldn't be koine. Then even the fact that he's standing in one place, he pausing his walk, it doesn't help us. So when the answer is we're talking about that the Eved was actually tied up. Big machek is a sheni where the Eved also has to be asleep at the same time because there's another issue. He's tied up, but still it's mishtameres l'daitoi. Even if he's tied up, if he's up, then he's thinking about him, for himself, for his own. He's not thinking about the woman that he's there to be kind of for half of the woman. So Taisus here, other Rishonim hold he has to be asleep. Others disagree at the time. In fact, Rashi doesn't mention a word about him being asleep. That's din number 1. Din number 2, which is exactly the same principle, but a different example. One word says, he wrote her get and placed it in his chutzah. Because they wrote a separate gift contract to his wife based on the chutzah. They could assume she's kind of the chutzah and she's divorced at the same time. The principle is the same. He's giving her the chatzah and the get is sitting in the chatzah. The principle is exactly the same. Why do we need two examples? The same principle. We need both examples, but each one there's a possible cause or reason that we should make it. We should disallow it. Because it doesn't work in all cases. So why are we worried that if you're going to allow this case, they might use the other example, and that's no good? What are we talking about? Let's talk about the Eved first. The Yashmin Eved, now we just said before, an Eved that's mobile, or even if an Eved is standing still, but if he's not tied up, it's not going to work. Especially according to Jason, if he's not tied up and sleeping, it's not going to work. So let's be going so that all avodim shouldn't work, because next time the Eved will be up, or the Eved won't be tied down. And Kamashla, we're not going to make our own decrees. We're trying to help her out. No. Get, proper get, yeah. In his hand. But when it comes to that's the problem with an Eved. And the problem with the Chatzar is as follows. If the husband would have given the get, placed the get in somebody else's, a third party's Chatzar, and then that third party would give the woman the Chatzar and the Chatzar as a gift. So you would say, well, the woman now is kind of the Chatzar, the get is sitting there. But in that case, it won't work. That's called a Chatzar Bolach B'kam. Why would that work? Because who's actually giving her the get? The husband placed the get in the Chatzar that belonged to a third party. It's a third party who's giving it. What right does he have to give the get? He's not the husband. It's one thing the husband worked for, a shliach. We did. So therefore, that doesn't work. So should we be worried that if we allow, chatzah where the husband gives it directly, then next time chatzah will be indirectly? That's why we have to spell out chatzah. And by Eved, are we worried that next time they'll be wide awake or won't be tied down? Only by the Eved work of a chatzah, but when it comes to chatzah, let us be worried. If the chatzah comes through a third party, via a third party, so the get is being given to her by that third party because the get is already singing the chatzah, and that definitely doesn't work. So maybe we should disallow all chatzeres if it doesn't already belong to her prior. So let just tell us the case of a chatzar. I never thought chatzar owned by chatzar works because we're not really that worried. We're not that concerned. Aval Eved, when it comes to an Eved, because the case of the chatzar is a totally different case. Then instead of the chatzar going from husband to wife, he goes to another person to wife. That's very different than the first case. But an Eved, ligoze kafas or kafas. I mean, how often do you tie down your Eved? So maybe we'll be worried that not everybody is aware that you have to tie down the Eved, and maybe that's a more possible concern. I'm not concerned either way. Comes along Abai and says that he does not agree with the principle of Gitta v'Yadeh in the case of Chatzar. And why not? Amar Abai says Mechdi. Chatzar meheche Isra, but we're going to learn in Gemara in Bab Mitzvah if you're out there. What is the base of a Chatzar? Why does a Chatzar work? He says, I'll tell you. Chatzar works miyada. We're going to learn over there, according to the Rif, according to the number of Shainim, there's a difference chatzah by a boy or by a girl, where chatzah comes from. And but the silly gets, where does the Gemara conclude that chatzah is miyad, but not where's the shlichus? So it says about where do we learn chatzah from? We learn chatzah from yad, just like your hand, can receive your gittin. So too, your chatzah is like an extended hand, can also receive the get. The problem is that your yad can receive the get whether she agrees or she doesn't agree. He just places it in her hand and she's divorced. But in this case, other case of chatzah, it's a gift. If she doesn't accept the gift of the chatzah, she won't be divorced. So it's not like yad. If the chatzah already belonged to her and you place the get there, that's like yad. Abai said I agree with that. But in this case over here, you want a gift to the chatzah. That means it has to be medaita. The only way a chatzar is similar to yad is if it's bein medaita, bein bakarcha. So says Abaye, merdi chatzar merdi. So we learn chatzar from yada from her hand. Ma yada, when it comes to her hand, the isa it applies bein medata, bein bakarcha, whether she agrees or she doesn't, because we don't need her consent. Av chatzeda, when does chatzar work? Only with the isa bein medaita, bein bakarcha. Only when it's even against the consent. She owns the house, you throw it through the window. She's divorced. But over here, if you want to gift it to her, she can always say no. So it's not like yad, it doesn't work. Says the Gemara, sorry. And he said, Abai concludes, this case of Chatzah, it's a gift, and a gift, it's up to her. Mas Rashi attacks Abai, and he says, So you're telling me that it has to be every time that it works by a woman is only if it's medaita and balkarcha. So let me ask you a question. When it comes to shlichus, a woman can appoint, just like a husband can appoint a shliach to deliver the get, she can appoint a shliach to receive the get on her behalf. Now, the only way that she can have a shliach is if she does it medaita. No, according to you, the only time that we can extend her is in the case where it's like yada medaita and balkarcha. So how can she appoint a shliach lekabbalah? So we ask a question: shliach lekabbalah, the medaita is balkarcha. It can only work if she agrees, if she appoints the shliach. And yet, lekabbalah, we know that it's functional. We know that's effective. How can that be? Says the Gemara. So Abaye answered back. Abaye gives two answers. First of all, he says, what does shlichus have to do with chatzah? Chatzah we learn from yad, but shliach we learn from a pasuk. It says by Gittin. It says v'shilcha, the husband sends her out of the house. But if you take away the mapik hey, you can read v'shilcha two ways, translate two ways. V'shilcha means he sends her away, or v'shilcha is she sends away. If it's a mapik hey, she's on the receiving end. So v'shilcha, he sent her out of the house. But otherwise, v'shilcha, we take out the mapik, it reads she sends a shliach. So that's nothing to do with yad. So who said you need daita bakoch? Number one. Abaye oto shlichas meyadis rabayim v'shilach shilchis rabayim. We learn from the word v'shilach shilcha. She said v'shilcha. Imagine it's not a hey mapik hey. She sends a shliach. Number one. Number two. In shlichas, the boy say in shlichas lekabbalah, you saying that she appoints a shliach. Sometimes we have a shliach acting on her behalf, whether she accepts it or not. And once we find a shliach somewhere that works, even by karcha, she can always appoint a shliach. But by chatzah, a gift, you can never force her to take a gift. And where do we see that shlichus is against her will? A father, mekabel, get bitiktana, can act on behalf of his younger daughter, if she's a minor, bal karcha, whether she likes it or not. So therefore, we find an example of shlichus also where it is bal karcha. No, according to the second answer, he's saying even if we don't learn shlichus from a separate pasuk b'shilach, even if we learn shlichus from Yoda, it is similar to Yoda because I can find you an instance where it is so coercive, where we don't need her consent at all. Okay. So Tais asks the question. So what about chatzah? I'll find you an example where chatzah is against the will. If she already owned the chatzah, he can throw it in. Just like you found me one example of shlichus where it's against the will, and he said that's good enough. So chatzah also I'll find one example. She already owns the property. You're talking about an example where the chatzah is gifted to her. I'll show you an example by chatzah that's effective where she already owns it. So Tais says no. By a father, there's nothing she can do to stop it. By a chatzah, if she already owns it, she can disown it. And if she disowns it, it's no longer hers. So therefore, she can at least stop it from happening. So it's not really against her will. The fact that she can disown it, therefore, she sort of agrees to it because she's not disowning the chatzah. Mashain came over here that when her father collects her get on her behalf, there's nothing she can do. She cannot divorce her father. There's nothing she can do that she'll wriggle away out of it. So there's a case of coercion in the case of shlichus. Once we have one case of coercion, it's similar to yad. But when it comes to a chatzah, there's never a full case of coercion because she always has that option of disowning the house, disowning the property.
Are we trying to do get and chatzah combination, or we're trying to say get and matana combination?
We're saying two.
Chatzah is the example of the matana.
That's right. So we gave two answers. That's the question. The shlichus works only if she accepts, only if she agrees, and yet shlichus is effective. And you laid out a rule. It has to be similar to yad, has to be by coercion. So Abaye gave two answers. One answer is shlichus has nothing to do with yad. Shlichus we learn from Shimcha. Answer number one. Answer number two is grant you that shlichus comes from yad, but we do find a case of coercion by shlichus. In the case of a father accepting on her behalf, but by chatzah we never find a case of coercion because since it's a gift, in this case the chatzah is a gift. So the Teshuvah asked, but we do find a case of coercion by chatzah, the concept of chatzah, and that's good enough. Just like shlichus.
Why is the comparison chatzah? Chatzah is just an example of a matana.
No,
the comparison.
How she kind of. Let's say you gave her a matana, but you didn't give the get as a matana. You're giving her the chatzah as a matana, and the get will be kind of her.
One example you gave an evidence of matana.
Yeah. But how is she kind of the get via the chatzah? And that is what we learn from Yad. not the matana part. What are we learning from Yad? Why does your chutzner? Why is it acquiring your behalf? Because just like a hand can acquire your behalf, so too can the chutzner. So you then said you said that the problem by chutzner is that this is a case of a gift. So when we find a case of coercion by this kind of a kinyan chutzner, you throw it into her house. So they said, but then she could always get out of it. Mashenki with her father, she can never get out of it. So they've said it's a tacit agreement. The fact that she didn't disown the house. Let's see the Gemara. Says the Mishnah also right, the belief of an olive. And takes it says over here in the Chaval at the top, it's only those things that actually have permanence. Leave a lot can stay for a long time. I understand the hand of an Evid. I understand the hand of an Evid. Why? It's not a valid get is because you can't chop off the hand. You can't chop off the hand. Now, the reason why you cannot chop off the hand is because if you wound your Evid, they go scot-free. With, Rashi or the 24 different limbs, if you harm your Evid, it goes free. That means you're not allowed to harm them. But then the Rashi adds a few words, which I don't know why you have to add it. The Shaykh with mitzvahs. An Evid has mitzvahs like a Nisha. What's the role of that? The law is that that if you 24 Rashi Varim, if you harm your Evid, you have to set him free. So that means you're not allowed to harm him. That's it. So maybe Rashi is trying to give us a reason why Taka did the Torah say you're not allowed to harm your evidence because he's almost a yid. A homo is a full-fledged yid because he's shaykh mitzvahs like a woman. Except the few mitzvahs that a man has that a woman doesn't have, he's exempt until he's set free. Maybe that's what Rashi is trying to give a reason why you're not allowed to harm an evidence. Otherwise, what's the relevance of shaykh mitzvahs? Anyway, the Gemara continues. Elakeren shall potter, the horn of a potter, like tzayu, it's a problem. Cut it off, level and give it the horn. On Makrok, the pasuk says, the cost sav the nasan law. There's only two activities there. You write and you give it to her. There's no other activity. In this case, there are three activities. Mechutza is missing, lacking ksiva, you have to write it. Then tzitzi, you have to cut it, and then you have to give it to her. Rabbi Yisrael really says any living thing. You're not allowed to write an animal, you're not allowed to write the hand of an ev, you're not allowed to write on the horn of an animal. Any living thing you cannot use as material for your get. My time, but then where does he know that from? The Tanya we learned. It says in Pasuk, it says that a man, it says in Pasuk, the cost of law safer creatures, you write this safer. We'll see whether safer means a document, like it's a noun, or safer is a description, like an adjective, a story. Safer cases of severance, and the nosan beyoda you place it in your hand. That's a safer. The Tanya says safer. Ain't safer means a parchment. But you can include anything else. The cost of law, whatever you want, you can write on. With Kalmok, you can write on other things as well. You came out safer. So why limit it to safer when in fact because you can write on anything. Just like a safer is something which is not a living thing. And it's not food. I've called there's no life in it. The ain't is not food. Now, we have a rule whenever you have a cloud and a prat, the prat is very limiting, and here we're expanding. So Tosha says there's actually a klal afterwards. We many times doesn't bother telling you what the klal after is, because it says the cost of love, which is a klal, right on anything. Then it says safer creases right on the safer, and it says v'nosel biyada, place in hand, place anything in your hand. So it's a klal, prat, uklal. So it's only coming to exclude things which are a living thing and so on. Rabbanon, and they say you could write on an animal on the hand of an evid. Iksiv bas sefer, write within the document, and you're right. Hatuchsiv sefer is not a noun. It's a description. It's an adjective. L'sfiras v'ardos to tell you that in this document, write the story. Write what you're doing. You can't just give a document her name on it and say, "Oh, this document you're free." You have to incorporate in the document exactly what the divorce is all about. Since the Rabbanon, he says a cloud, you can write anything, the Rabbanon, why does it have to say because of? You don't need it all. It could have just said V'nas and Sefer Krisis. Give a document that has the story that you're severing your ties. They must say, no, what we need it for, teach something else. When you get married, we learned the first Mishnah in Kedushin says you can marry in feasible ways, either using money or a document or beer. So we would have thought, okay, we understand beer can't work to separate yourself, but since the document works, maybe also the money. The same way that you get married is the same way that you can divorce. In fact, we learned from the pasuk, the yotza b'hois lishacha, the yotza is divorce, b'hois is Kedushin, and lishacha. So we equate the two. In fact, that's why Masechta Gittin takes precedence over Masechta Kedushin, is or why it was prioritized, because the pasuk does well yotza the hoisa, and we equate the two. So when it comes to teach you, that's what I tell you. No, because the only way that you can divorce her is with a document. Because something I would have thought, I would have before we compare getting married and divorce. No, you can only use a divorce to separate. You know, either who, where does Rabbi Yossi learn that from? Basically, Sefer creases. It says the Sefer is what severs the tie. Sefer korsav ain't davar korsav. No other way. No money. Nothing. Only a document. The Idach. What did Rabban do with the word Sefer creases when he creases for? Let's say Sefer. The boile davar hakoydes beino leben. It can't be any strings attached after you get divorced. We had it a few times before. We had it before already. You cannot have any strings attached. The time you learn. If a man says to his wife, I'm giving you a get and condition the rest of your life you cannot drink wine. I want you to remember me. That strings attached. That's not severance, a complete severance. You should never go to your family's house. Even though the father eventually will pass away, but if it stays within the family, the children are considered based avicha. But if he says for 30 days, if he actually says as long as I'm alive, it's also considered crisis because it's potential that you'll outlive him. That's very considered crisis. The Ida Mekaris, so is like Lily, what do you call it? So sorry, that's what he uses crisis. So the Gemara says, and what do you do with it? With how do they learn the other one? How does he learn this din over here that has to be total severance? Mekaris crisis. Now what it could have said, Sefer Koris. But Sefer Krisus, the extra of soft, the teacher has to be final. Either Koris doesn't Koris Krisus. It doesn't believe that the extra of stuff actually teaches you any halachas. Next Mishnah. Ein Kaisim Mechul. You're not allowed to write a doctor a get while still attached to the ground, and then cut it off. Again, we just said before, only two activities: ksiva and the sim. You can't have ksiva, then cutting it off, and then giving it. So it starts out you're not allowed to write when it's attached. But then the Mishnah says, if you did write it when it's attached, Toshri, and then you cut it off, and then you signed it, you signed it when it's detached, it's kosher. It's a problem. Start off saying you don't, and then you say, and it's, as long as you did this, it's all right. We'll talk about it. Rabbi Yehuda passes it, disqualifies it. Everything being unattached. If you remember more before, we used Rabbi Yehuda to say that possibly also the first mission that said that both are equally important is Rabbi Yehuda. The obvious question is the moment if you write it's detached. And of course, when you signed it, it's detached. Why does it, all he had to say was make sure when you write it's detached. So Teiser asked a question backed up Dalit, and Teiser answered no. You can write it detached, and then remember we learned the idea of grafting the tree or putting it back in the ground, and then wait till it grows. So he said, we can do that. It says ain't kaisrin. You don't write learning on not on a paper that's already erased, because once it's erased once, you can erase the second time, and maybe there was a condition in there that you erased, and Adam signed, and now it changes the whole. You get the complexion they get. But loyal to the different parchment that has been totally worked through. It's only been salted and you put flour in it. You put that to walnut. Juice. They should yochel is die. It's very easy to forge. The chachamim machshin. Chachamim not concerned. We'll see later because you have Eid and Sirah. And they know exactly what it says in the get. Says the Gemara. First of all, I don't understand the Mishnah. It starts off kosva mechuba. If you wrote it, it's all right. You just did you open up the Mishnah by saying ein kaisin is forbidden to write such a get. Now remember the two parts to the get. There's the taifus, the standard template, and then there's the taidif where you put in and insert the names of the husband, the wife, the date, and the place. So what it is the first Mishnah says don't write the tairif while it's attached. And then he says, but if you wrote the tatif while it's attached, and as long if you wrote the taifus while it's attached, as long as the tatif is not attached, it's good enough. And what's the logic behind it? Remember, the Mishnah says the kosav. There's two ways of understanding the kosav. Are we talking about the actual get or the signature of the witnesses? According to Meir, the kosav refers to the signature of the witnesses. According to the Rabbi Lazar, the kosav refers to the actual document itself because you have Eidim Masir. You don't even need Eidim Chasim. But which part of the document is critical is the Torah. As long as you, we don't want you to write any part of the get while it's attached. Because if you write the Torah as the template, maybe next time you'll also write the Torah. But if you wrote the Torah while detached, it's good enough. Left the Torah means the reveal part, the part that's going to reveal exactly what's going on here. But Abelazar, this follows view. Abelazar, which Eidim are the one that count is the Eidim, the one that saw the transfer. This is how you read the Mishnah. Ain't Kaisin Taifis. I don't want you to write the template while it's attached because we're worried. You might also write the titles attached. But Kosru the Taifis. If you did write the Taifis, as long as the toe shoe, you then cut it off, and then Kosru the Taif, and then you wrote the Taif afterwards. It was detached. We're not saying if the kosher is kosher. But Reish Lakish says Chasmai Shaninu. Reish Lakish disagrees. He says no. But when it says here, don't write b'mechuber, we're talking about the witnesses. And he says if you did write mechuber, as long as he detached it, we're talking about if you wrote the actual get. Because according to Rav Meir, when it says the Torah of a customer, he's talking to the witnesses. That's the part that counts. Rav Meir, remember, Rav Meir doesn't care about the ksiva so much. Doesn't have to be lishma. Rav Meir, he holds which of the pivotal aid, the critical aid, the mother aid the ksiva. This is what the Mishnah, how read the Mishnah. Don't write the Torah. Don't write the Chatchila the Torah because maybe the witnesses then will sign also what's attached. Or the Kosher the Torah, if you did, doesn't matter as long as kosher and Chassid doesn't kosher. You have to give the kosher. Says in Mishnah Gemara further, let's say you have a potted plant that's punctured, which means it's getting nurtured from the ground. Remember, the trumas and mice, all that we consider as if it's a part of the ground. But what happens is he wrote it on the earthen, the pot itself. So he's saying it here. He wrote on the chedesh shel otzes on the earthen part of this pot of plant. Kosher is kosher. Why? The shokalei the yarvlei nele. Why is it kosher? Because you can pick up the whole plant and give it to her. There's no third activity here. You don't have to do anything else. Just give her the plant. And you're not cutting anything off because you didn't write on the plants itself. You wrote on the pot. What about al shalos? You wrote on one of the plants growing out of this potted plant that's punctured. So it's l'chayda mechuber. Amar by kosher, still kosher. You can ask, why is it kosher? It's mechuber. It's halachically or legally, it's considered as if it's attached to the ground. And we said before that if you have that if it's attached, it's no good. But kosher, the shokalei there's no third activity here. The whole reason why it's forbidden to write on a leaf that's attached is because you have to write it, then cut it off and give it. Here, it's a theoretical cutting off. There's no real cutting off. You pick up the whole paddle plant and just give it to her. So therefore, there's no third activity. And Rabbi says, "Puzzle is puzzle." We are worried that maybe you will cut it off. Okay, we'll stop over here.